Welcome to Marketing Demystified, the podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You are in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. Now, why do customers really choose your brand? If you think it's because of your features or even the benefits that you offer, you'd be mistaken. Today, we're exploring why successful brands focus less on what they want to tell customers and more on how their brand interactions make customers feel. Today, I'm joined by Kevin Perlmutter, Chief Strategist, founder of Limbic Brand Evolution, and author of Brand Desire, Spark Customer Interest Using Emotional Insights. With over 30 years in brand strategy, including his time as Senior Director of Brand Strategy at Interbrand, Kevin has developed the Limbic Sparks Brand Strategy, a behavioral science-rooted approach that puts emotional insight at the center of brand building. He's worked with dozens of global brands and is here to share why understanding emotional motivations is what separates thriving brands from struggling ones. Welcome to the show, Kevin.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Jen.
I'm so excited to have this conversation today, especially this sort of crossover between what marketing needs from insights and the concept of emotional insights and how that feeds into brand. So important. Really excited to have you on.
It's really great to be here, and I love everything we're about to talk about.
Me too. So let's start actually with your new book, which I can see in the background there, Brand Desire. What actually inspired you to write this book?
Do you ever have one of those moments or situations where you come into some information that's like gold, like nope, you feel like nobody's ever heard it before. You feel like it's new. And I had one of those situations in my last job, which I left over 6 years ago. I was working with a behavioral science research company, and we created a proprietary research capability for my company that I was working for using behavioral science, using emotional understanding at the subconscious level, getting into neuroscience-based research techniques that I've never worked with before. And I suddenly started to realize that everything I was learning about how the brain works, everything I was learning about how our instinctive emotional responses guide our conscious feelings and behaviors and actions and associations, all of that information was something that never came up in my prior many years working, even at one of the largest global brand consultancies. And I started to think, well, there's something to this that brand leaders and other consultants need to know about. So I launched my consultancy. I created Limbic Sparks Brand Strategy, but ultimately I wanted to build enough momentum to put this insight out into the world to help brand leaders be more successful and maybe to make a small dent on the industry by bringing this behavioral science approach forward in ways that that replace traditional approaches that are not nearly as effective.
That's so interesting, especially for someone like me as a, I've spent most of my career working as a marketer in the insights space. So working with companies or in companies that are responsible for consumer insights, behavioral science, and it's all to serve marketing. Yet I hear so often marketers, when they come across these techniques and these methodologies, feeling like you felt like, oh my gosh, this is gold, and I've never had the experience before. And I just think there's so much opportunity for marketers to be doing more with insights and behavioral science and neuropsychology type of things, not just, ad testing or, more traditional, I guess, survey type quantitative methodologies and things like that, if that's what you're talking about by like sort of traditional ways of doing things.
There are so many traditional ways of doing things that we can talk about, and we probably will,
Yeah.
that I think can be replaced by more effective behavioral science rooted methods. But you're bringing up one right now, which is research capabilities. And so much research, traditional research, is survey based, and it has limitations if you truly want to understand emotional insights. If you want to understand people's emotional motivations at a gut level, at an instinctive level, if you want to understand the drivers of their decisions and behaviors, you're not going to get that post-rationalized survey-based responses all the time. People have tendencies to talk about in surveys what they want people to hear. There's a lot of social conformity bias going on. There's a lot of projecting. There's a lot of, well, this is what I'm feeling, but this is what I should probably say. And when you use techniques that are getting people at the subconscious level, like implicit association testing or metaphor elicitation, and you're using them accurately with neuroscience based validity, you're getting people's instinctive emotional responses. And it's not just about research techniques, it's about qualitative techniques as well. In my work with clients, I use these quantitative research techniques on occasion, but most of the time I'm doing customer interviews and I'm using questioning techniques that are more likely to get people to emote an accurate, instinctive response than to hold back. If I was to say to you, what's the worst part about your podcast? You're going to fall back in your seat. You're going to sweat a little and you're going to not want to give me an answer that may be on your mind. You're not going to be happy with the question. But if I said to you, what is one thing that you'd absolutely love to improve about your podcast so it's better for listeners? You're probably going to lean in and smile and tell me something that you've been thinking about or gnawing on that you want to go and do. I'm going to get a totally different response just by asking the question in a different way. And it's because of how the brain responds to questions and stimulus and other things like that.
Yes, absolutely. And I want to get more into that stuff too. But you mentioned, so we're talking about research methods and different types of ways that we can get consumer feedback or customer feedback and things like that. But also, you talk about traditional brand strategy being stuck, and in your words, stuck in the persuasion era.
Mm-hmm.
I'm interested to hear in your own words sort of what that means and why is that holding brands back?
Well, traditional approaches to brand strategy and marketing were created long before the internet, long before we had social media, long before we had online customer reviews. And brands can get away, in that era, brands could more aptly get away with hiding bad brand experiences behind good advertising. But now brands get exposed because customer experience and reviews and those things really matter and play a tremendous amount of weight. However, the approaches used in that era where it was mostly about advertising and creating about us statements, and there's language in our creative briefs that have sustained for years that actually send us in the wrong direction. When you have a unique selling proposition, it's all about selling. What are we going to sell? What's the pinnacle of what we're selling and why it's important? When you have language like proof points and reasons to believe, it's about proving to people that your brand is what it needs to be. None of that language actually leads you to or steers you to a desire to understand more about your customer and gathering insights from what they need, want, and desire and care about. So there's a lot of persuasion-based selling. There's a lot of here's what we as a brand want to say. There's a lot of what's our why, not enough who's our who. And there's a lot of internal confirmation bias that tells us that, well, if this is what we've always said, or this is what we think we need to say now, or this is what we want to sell, here's what we believe people will need, want, and desire. There's a total void in some cases, and not total in every case, but there's not enough use of understanding customers through methods that will help you understand their motivations and what they need, want, and desire in their own world, regardless of your brand, so you can create relevant intersections.
So you couldn't see me while I was off screen there, if those of you who are watching live, but I was dancing. I got out of my chair. I was dancing in the background at that response. I love what you've described there. And I think it's a very bold statement, actually, to say, to kind of, speak out against this concept of USPs and RTBs. And, this is all about us. And that's one of the biggest challenges, I think, in brand strategy and marketing, is focusing too much on your business and not enough on your customers. I just had a conversation today with someone I know who is launching a new family business. And I said, absolutely, I'll chat with you guys about, kind of bringing this new product to market. And one of the team members said, do you see any red flags with this business concept, right? And like what we're trying to do. And, you've seen businesses do well and fail, and anything with our product and our offering. And I said exactly what you've just described. Like, the product itself, yeah, it's a good concept. It's a good idea. It clearly solves a need in the market. But the key to the success is going to be how well you understand your customers.
Yeah.
And if you can get them on the phone, talking to them and asking the right questions, don't ask people if they would buy it, because they're going to say yes. But ask them about the last time they had this problem and how they went about solving it, all the different sort of question techniques you talked about. And, that's how you are going to be able to market effectively, is by communicating that you understand your customer and solve a very specific problem for them, not talking about all your features and benefits.
And I'm going to jump in there for a second, because you just said something so key, which is understanding how you solve a specific problem for them. But it's not about sitting in a conference room and saying, hey, what kind of problems do we solve for our customers? It's not about doing it that way. You actually get the best insights. One of the biggest things that I found is that brand leaders don't know nearly as much about why their brand and product offering is so great versus their customers. Their customers know much more than them and better than them about what exactly makes their brand desirable. So when you have conversations with your customers, when you analyze the reviews that they write about, they openly write on their own about what they like and sometimes dislike about your brand, you're going to get so much specific insight. And you can start to aggregate that insight into buckets of the core brand benefits. And what you'll often find, I almost always find it, is those benefits have nothing to do with overtly the product features. It has everything to do with how that brand experience makes them feel. And you can take a business that might be a commodity and make it differentiated based on the brand experience and what people play back as the reasons why they keep going back to that brand. So there's so much insight you can gather from customers that you can actually turn into the most compelling reasons why people choose your brand, and make the assumption that there are more people out there who want to experience those benefits if they knew where to find them.
And what you said of how your customers know more about that than you do is so incredibly key. Because I hear that question a lot of, like, or maybe more commentary, just like, we know our business, we know our customers, right? And I often will talk to companies and say, hey, you know more about your product than anyone else ever will or ever needs to.
Yeah.
And the challenge is not telling them everything, because you know too much. But actually, on the flip side, your customers know more than you do about why they're buying it.
Exactly. I won't work with a brand leader if I don't have access to their customers. Not because I dislike them for making that choice, but because I can't do my best work. I can't have reliable brand strategy if I don't talk to customers or understand customers. Whether, there's some clients where you can gather that insight from aggregating hundreds of reviews and doing a sentiment analysis and a linguistic analysis on what people are saying. There are some brands where you can do 20 one-on-one interviews with customers and get enough insight. There are some brands where I have a client that I've worked with recently where it's in a category where I insisted that we bring in quantitative behavioral science research because the say-do gap in that category is so great that I couldn't rely just on verbal qualitative interviews to get reliable insights. And those choices of how you gather information before setting brand strategy and creating brand messaging are just as important as what you decide. Because if you're creating strategy on a loose foundation of insight that's either old information, rooted in confirmation bias, or pulled from the wrong sources, you're not going to have the foundation you need to truly be accurately differentiated and desirable.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And also, it's just like, I think it can be very energizing to talk to clients
So
too.
energizing. It's my favorite part of the work. I love when I'm like, I'm working with a client and we're in that month or so of doing one-on-one interviews. And all of a sudden these interviews start popping on my calendar. And people talk about having faith in the process. I start every client project with more questions than answers. I have no idea what the solution is going to be. I don't entertain too many gut instincts early on. I start to gather information. I start to take some notes. I get to the end of insights discovery before I decide anything that I'm thinking about recommending. But as I have those interviews, my whole perspective changes every time. I start to learn things. I start to hear nuggets. I hear all of a sudden, like my brain starts firing on all of these ideas that wouldn't have happened if I just relied on what my clients already told me about their business.
For sure. For sure. And even that piece about like how the brand makes them feel, like you can feel that in that conversation.
Absolutely.
When I have conversations with my clients, customers, I get off, I'm like, oh my gosh, these guys are amazing. They're doing such great work and they're adding so much value, right? Like it can be very energizing and
You
exciting.
can even have more confidence in recommending, quote, bold,
sure,
which I describe as, very creative and accurate, not risky. You could have more confidence in recommending those things. I had a client once where we were looking at a potential brand idea or tagline that was going to be the beacon for how their brand communicated in all ways. And they were like, well, that's a really bold statement. Do you really think we can claim that in the category? I said, you not only can, you're already delivering it. We're not talking about filling the white space with some aspirational idea that you may not be able to deliver. I have spoken with your customers. I have analyzed your reviews. I know for a fact that this is how you make your customers feel. And all you have to do is claim it so other people know where to find that feeling. And you can take the top position in the category when it comes to the highest level brand benefits that people are seeking.
Yeah, yeah. That's incredible. And the validation of that to be able to say,
Yes,
yes, I am confident that you can claim this because it came out of the data.
absolutely.
Amazing. So how could a business leader today identify that maybe their current brand strategy is too persuasion focused versus emotionally relevant?
Well, first of all, if their brand idea and their brand messaging and benefits are about us statements, we do this, we do that, we do this. If there's no for you in there, if it's all about what they do, then you're not being reflective of what people care about. 99% of the time, any copy that gets written for the brands that I'm a part of is written in the first person. It's to you, the customer, for you, the customer. This is what you will feel. This is, and maybe not using this is what, but using language that helps them know what to expect and what they'll feel. So one way to diagnose that you're still in persuasion land is that if you're writing about us statements in your brand copy. The other way is if you haven't spoken with a customer recently or haven't looked at any reviews and you're not using that information to guide what people care about when it comes to your brand and what people are responding to in a positive way, or if it's negative in any way, how you're going to, address those issues. So you're still in persuasion era if you're standing in the room with your team at a whiteboard trying to come up with ideas without customer understanding and insight at your fingertips.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great tip. The other thing too, I'm curious to hear your perspective on is, you started to talk about like the different sort of question strategies that you might have in those customer interviews. I've been in situations in the past where when we've got time with a customer, we have 30 minutes or we have an hour, and there's sometimes can be pressure to ask for feedback on specific product features or things like that, product experience as opposed to brand experience. Like, how do you think about the focus of that time and the type of questions that you ask in order to get to that outcome that you're seeking of getting away from that persuasion focused messaging?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and I cover it very deeply in Brand Desire, the types of questions you can be asking.
Mhm.
One thing is my clients rarely ask me for the list of questions that I'm going to be asking, and nor will I agree to a list that doesn't get me what I need in the time that I have. The
Mhm.
questions that I ask are meant to evoke, just like I shared in the example about when I was asking you about your podcast, evoke things that will help unearth what people are feeling about certain things without leading the witness. I'll ask questions like, what's the best thing that this brand does for you? What have been the biggest surprises since interacting with this brand? What are 3 words that you would use to describe how this brand's products or services make you feel? If
Mhm.
this brand was to go away, what would you miss the most? If
Mhm.
this brand was a superhero, what would be its singular superpower? These are the kinds of questions that I ask customers, and there are more, and I have a whole bank of them, more of them described in the book, and I always customize the questions for the brand and the time that we have. But these are the kinds of questions that get people to emote, to share openly what they're feeling about the experiences that they're having. And if you were to recommend this brand to a friend, what's the one reason why you'd say they should use it, purchase it, hire them, whatever it is?
Mhm.
So these are the kinds of questions that get to the answers for how does this brand make people feel, and what are the most desirable and compelling brand benefits.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, the being very clear and specific about the objective of this engagement, like what you're describing, those questions, and this is all to get to a place of understanding how to communicate your brand benefits effectively. And like we
Yeah.
said at the beginning, not even benefits necessarily, but the brand
Well, yes,
desire.
benefits, and if I could, I want to share, like, I talked about some of the challenges with
Sure.
persuasion era language. There's actually some language that I use that I describe in Brand Desire, that is part of Limbic Sparks Brand Strategy, that shifts the conversation and the way you actually think about this as in your role as a brand leader or a consultant. And one of them is, when you're going through that discovery process and asking all those questions and doing research and doing all the digging that you would do to understand context, both from the client side and the customer side, you end up with one deliverable, which is the shared emotional motivation. So the
Mhm.
shared emotional motivation does not exist in traditional brand strategy, but I define it as the core Limbic Sparks insight, or the brand benefit, what both the brand and the customer are most motivated to achieve individually and together. So if you could understand, what is this brand in the world doing in the world to make people's lives better, and what are they passionate about, but simultaneously understand what are people doing in their lives or business that they need, want, and desire more help with, or something like that. What's the challenge they're trying to solve, or what are they trying to achieve? And you could find the intersection, that shared motivation, that gives you an insight and an entry point to create a brand idea or a tagline. And that brand idea can't, as I said, be an about us statement. It must be, as I define it, a compelling brand benefit and invitation, a benefit and an
Mhm.
invitation. So for instance, I worked with a client in the SaaS platform, in the SaaS space, with a inventory management system, And what they're in the world to do is to help make inventory planning more precise for warehouses that have thousands of SKUs and all kinds of locations and seasonal variability. What their customers are trying to achieve day in and day out is precise inventory planning. So that shared emotional motivation can get you to an idea that isn't an about us statement, but helps inventory managers and planners know how they will feel if they bring this brand into their world. And for that particular brand, based on customer insight and coming out of that shared emotional motivation, we got to a brand idea, the compelling brand benefit and invitation of be supply chain invincible. You can be supply chain invincible with this software platform at your fingertips because you will always have high confidence levels that your inventory predictions are right. And as we heard in one of the interviews, you go from the person in your company who's sometimes in trouble for having inaccurate information that is causing cash flow issues in a company or customer experience issues in a company, to the person who's the hero because they are always bringing those accurate insights and allowing everything to go smoothly for customer experience.
I love that, like, sort of reframing of it as an invitation.
Yeah.
And that tagline isn't, we have software.
No,
The tagline is, you are looking to get to some aspirational identity that you haven't quite achieved, and we're the key to that.
absolutely. It's taking the high road in the category and it's saying, your reason for being is to have accurate inventory levels, and we will help you be supply chain invincible. And it's just, it's a very big statement that their customers played back. And this is not the first time I've had big statements that customers help support, but customer insight got us to that idea and gave us confidence that it was right for the brand. And the entire story of that brand is, I think, chapter 6 in the book. I mean, so it's a full, like there are 6 case study chapters in the book, and all of them are 5,500 word chapters roughly that give the full backstory and behind the scenes of our work together. It's, I'm fortunate my clients were able to give me permission to reveal a lot of our work together and behind the scenes stuff.
Absolutely. There's a lot in there about sort of exactly how you're doing this work, which is amazing. And I love seeing examples out there in business and in the world of, these principles sort of in application, because a lot of this stuff is really hard.
Yeah.
It's not easy. Like, if you read the book, you'll hear how simple Kevin makes things, but it doesn't mean that it's easy. And I think one of the things that is really challenging for brands, and again, this story that you've just described is a great example of it, where the customer becomes the hero in the brand story, and you're there to guide them to their, desired place in the world, right? But it can be really difficult to not make yourself be the hero in your own story. But you're not. Your customer is. And
the customer is the one who needs to feel benefit.
Yeah.
We're inundated with stuff, and we're going to respond instinctively to the things that make us feel good and that feel like they were designed with us in mind. And I'm not here to say that a brand idea or a tagline is going to win the day, especially with a very expensive piece of software that has to be infused into an organization's infrastructure, but it will open doors to a conversation. It will get people interested because it sparked their emotional interest. And all of a sudden they're thinking, wow, I need to learn more about this. What about this will make me supply chain invincible? How is this different than anything else out there? And part of how it's different are those conversations that come next. Part of it are the core brand benefits that you highlight, which are not the features and benefits of a software platform. It's the fact that you will eliminate guesswork, you will maximize inventory performance, and you'll have a partnership with humans that will help you use the software to its maximum capability at any moment. And those are the kinds of benefits that we heard when interviewing customers for this brand.
Amazing. Amazing. So let's talk a little bit about Limbic Sparks Brand Strategy. And maybe if you would, maybe without giving too much away, break down the different components and talk about, like, what makes it different from traditional brand strategy.
Yeah, thanks. About giving stuff away, I gave up on not giving stuff away when I decided to write a book. So it's all
Well,
out there, and
that's what I mean. Please go read the book.
I'm very happy to share all the details of what I've created for everyone. That's the reason why I wrote it. The book breaks down the Limbic Sparks Brand Strategy process in full detail. There are 5 sections of the book. 3 of them in the middle are focus, connect, and evolve. And for each one, that's a phase of the process, and each one of those sections has a full chapter on how to go about that work, and then at least 1 chapter or 2 with a case study to demonstrate how a particular brand went through the entire process, with a heavy up on the part of the process that case study is in. But focus is this insights discovery phase. It's all about discovering that shared emotional motivation that your brand has in common with the people who you serve. So it goes into the details of the investigations you would do in insights discovery. It goes into details on those one-on-one interviews and questions you can be asking your clients as well as their customers. And then the second part of the book, or the second part of the book that I'm talking about now, it's actually part 3 of the book, is connect. And connect is all about strengthening connections by standing for those benefits that people care about the most. So it goes through the entire process of creating brand strategy from the insights that you've discovered in the last section. It talks about how to get to the brand idea, the positioning statement, how personality and voice traits play a role, how to land on emotional brand benefits that are going to be most compelling. And then the next section of the book is evolve, which is about creating brand expression and experiences that address how people want to feel. So you've done all this insights discovery, you understand how people want to feel, and you've created brand strategy rooted in what they care most about. Now it's time to create messaging and visual identity and brand experiences that actually feels like it was designed with people in mind. So when they encounter your brand, they instinctively feel like you understand them, that you get them, and that you have something to offer that they should want to check out more of. So those are the 3 core sections of the book and the process that I teach.
Amazing. And so I guess, like, what are some of the what was the question that just came up for me? So I want to talk a little bit about, like, persona. Um,
Okay.
so because as you're kind of walking through these steps, and the kind of that insights piece that you do right at the beginning is so critical, right?
Yep.
Have you ever kind of come across a situation where you're working with a client who's like, this is our customer, this is
Yeah.
the profile, and here's the persona of the type of people that buy from us, but we really like to sell to this new persona over here, and, like, sort of identifying, I guess, whether or not you actually create an emotion for that buyer,
Yeah.
or how do you think about, like, nailing the right segment of people as your customers in this process?
There are so many things baked into that question. I'm going to answer it in a few ways.
Okay.
Uh, so one of them is related to personas, and what I consider to be a challenge of traditional brand strategy is we've all come across personas of people, and they
Mhm.
all look very, some consultants get paid a lot of money just to do persona work and to identify core buying targets and what their profiles are. And I've received a lot of those decks from my clients over the years where they've said, these are our personas, and there's like 15 different types of people. And, one of them is, this is the chief financial officer, and this person is responsible for spending money, and they like money, and they like saving money, and they play golf, and they have a dog named Russ. And all of this information that's either obvious or not very helpful. I'm
Mhm.
exaggerating for effect, but oftentimes what you read about the person in that role is something that any consultant could have come up with standing in a conference room at a whiteboard and thinking about, if with some good knowledge of the world. And I'm not putting down the work that consultants do. What I'm saying is, if you do these customer interviews, if you truly understand your audience, you can come up with very precise emotion based personas. What emotionally motivates people in their world. And when we heard things like, um, as a buyer of inventory, I'm in the unenviable position of often being wrong because it's simply impossible to estimate accurately 50,000 SKUs at any given time. I would like nothing better than to have a piece of software that gave me a 95% confidence level that things would be accurate. These are the kinds of benefits that you can build into a persona that that's more precise and allows you to create messaging points and benefit points that will hit them square where they want to feel something better for their situation. So I have a lot to say about personas, but the other part of your question was about shifting personas, and there are two ways that I could answer that. One is I could say that I'm not a chief marketing officer consultant. I'm a brand strategy consultant. There are chief marketing officers and fractional chief marketing officers and ones that I know who are incredibly good at sizing the market and understanding where the biggest pool of potential profitable buyers are. That kind of work is not work that I do, but I know people who do it very well. The other thing is, but what sits in between the two, creating those personas and knowing exactly who to reach, is looking at your current set of customers and understanding who are your primary buyers, what are they saying, what benefits are they most interested in, and you could start to round out some profiles of different people. I recently did some behavioral science research with a Gen Pop audience, and we identified that certain segments of the population were incredibly apt and receptive to this brand and its offering and to getting involved, but it's not a segment that my client goes after or even understands very well. So we are now in a conversation about not only shifting some of their primary marketing from who they've been going after to who they probably should be going after, but we're also in a conversation about doing a deeper leg of research and maybe bringing in a cultural expert in that segment so that we could understand more about the nuances of that segment of people and how to be more precise in our understanding and our messaging to them. So occasionally the work you do opens up opportunities, and then you need to go deeper into understanding so that you can do it right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's exactly what I was curious about, is just that, like, identifying these new segments, but also curious, like, if you've ever been sort of doing this research and this these trying to do these customer interviews, and you can't find that shared motivation. You're like, actually, I don't know if this is a good target for you guys, because you're selling to the inventory manager. You'd really rather sell directly to the CFOs. They own more of the budget.
Yeah.
But
Well,
actually,
in that case, you have to look at both, right? So I mean, the luxury of what I'm doing is when I'm doing these interviews, the interviews are selected by my clients, and I'm asking for a representative sample of their customers,
yeah,
and sometimes some past customers to help me understand where things might have gone wrong. But I'm not often getting people who don't use the brand or have some feelings about it. So I'm not fishing for people who aren't the right customer. I'm usually getting the right representative customers. So that's part of the process that allows me to get insight as to what's going really well and what we can use to our advantage to attract new people who want those same benefits. But I've always been able to find that shared emotional motivation. Sometimes it shifts. It very often shifts. It always shifts the brand strategy and evolves the messaging so that we could be more precise and compelling going forward. But there's always a way to find that shared emotional motivation. The challenge with traditional brand strategy, when there's no investigation to find a shared emotional motivation, that's when you get into trouble by picking a territory of white space on the 2x2 that happens to be empty, but maybe it's not a territory that any customer wants to live in. And maybe it's a territory that your brand thinks it should live in because it's empty, but it's not authentically something you can deliver. And that's when you start to have challenges, when you're starting to pick territories opportunistically, as opposed to what is natural and accurate and authentic to the brand that you are and want to be, and what customers actually feel in the moments that they're with you today. So we can create bold things that take you down the road further and that lean toward areas where you may be going in the future, but we're never going to pick a spot on the white space and say, this is where you should be because nobody else lives there, if it's not something you can deliver and if it's not something that their customers are already feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it, and sort of like lean into what's already there as
Yeah.
opposed to trying to create something that
Well,
maybe isn't.
yeah, I mean, that's when you're standing in a room just trying to figure out what to say, then you're going to pick things that may not be right. When you're listening to customers and they're telling you what they feel and what they want to feel more of or less of, either way, you can use that insight to get to a very accurate place that's going to hit people where they want to be.
Yeah. I think there's like so much pressure though, pressure to like, expand your targets and broaden our audience. And yes, I know this is where we're finding success and we could get more out of that. But what if we went over here, right? Like, there is
Yeah.
this like desire to do that and pressure to do that. And I think that is, sometimes it works well if maybe you've taken the right steps to do the research and
Yeah.
understand that segment. But I've also seen it go very poorly and see round square pegs and round holes.
There are two things you got to do to get there and do it accurately.
Yeah.
First of all, it's not just about saying, let's go over there and start marketing. The one thing is, as I mentioned before, there are some very wonderful and qualified people out there who are good at sizing the market and sizing market opportunities. And if you're working with someone like that and they're like, yeah, there's a great opportunity here for you that you're not going after, then that came up in some research that I did recently. It comes up when people specifically are tasked with figuring out the answers to that challenge. Finding that is an important piece of the puzzle. So you're not investing all of this resource going after a segment that's too small to make it worth your while without realizing it. So that's piece one. But once you identify that audience, there's some wonderful research techniques that you can use, whether they're customers already or not, whether it's quantitative or qualitative, that allows you to understand what motivates that customer so you can find the intersection of what your brand is all about and what they need, want, and desire in their world. And you can find that positioning, whether it's for the entire brand or if it's a sub-positioning for a particular segment. You can find that very accurately with this work. So what happens isn't what you described, where they just run after it and then it's a fail because of one reason or another.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. That just brought up another thought that I'm curious to hear your opinion on, and that's, what about when you are working with a company who has several different buying personas, and you need to kind of come up with that positioning and that messaging and that brand experience that has a common thread across all of them? How do you think about that?
I think about it a lot in every piece of client work that I do. So one of the things that I share throughout Brand Desire is that gathering all of this insight is an exercise in being robust and thorough and using the right techniques to get there. But I also emphasize throughout the book that as strategists, our job is to distill, to get it down to the essence of what we need to say. And getting it down to the essence in the connect phase is about what is the shared emotional motivation? What is the brand idea? What is the positioning statement? What are the three most compelling brand benefits that this brand should hang its hat on, because we already know that customers want to be there? And what I work hard on is making sure we have three very specific and compelling brand benefits that work for the entirety of the brand. But then in the evolve phase, when I talk about messaging, there's a whole section of a chapter on what I call the brand messaging hierarchy. And that gets into the persona work. So you build out the personas, whether it be in strategy or in evolve. And for each persona, you can have on that grid. So imagine a chart with 3 columns that have the 3 core brand benefits that sit under the brand idea. And then the rows are different brand personas. The top row could be the most emotionally compelling sub benefits under each of those 3 that apply to all customer segments. And then the rows below that can be specific buying audiences. So for that supply chain company, and the details of their brand messaging hierarchy are in the book, on one row, we have the C-suite, the folks who are responsible for approving the capital investment to buy the software. And on the row below that, we had the users of the software who are the ones on the hook every day to be supply chain invincible. And we were able to have the 3 core brand benefits, and one of them was eliminate guesswork. What does eliminate guesswork mean to somebody in the C-suite? What does eliminate guesswork mean to somebody who's using the software? And we have those specific benefits that all roll up to the top 3, but then break down for the different segments. So we're creating hierarchies of information that all ladder up to a single point and trickle down to what they need to be for the individual segments or personas.
Yeah, that's so key. It's so very rare that I come across a client that's like, nope, we've got one very specific, very niche persona, and that's the only one we sell to.
Never
Everybody's
happens.
no. Even if you did have that scenario, there's like, if you're in B2B and you're selling anything enterprise, there's a bunch of people in the
So many
decision
people
process.
involved, so many people involved. And that's the thing. A tagline is never going to make a big B2B sale on its own, but you've got to know what to say to the right people, where and when, what makes them tick. And then also, you know, the salespeople, a lot of these companies have sales teams and sales forces,
Yeah.
and salespeople are amazing at what they do, sales techniques, but without the right benefits and customer understanding, they're not going to be as effective, just like marketing won't be as effective with the wrong messages or persuasion-based techniques that aren't hitting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it all goes back into that research and those insights you did at the beginning.
Yeah, that's the key. That's one of the key differentiators between this and what other folks are doing. And then it's changing some of the language and giving some specific frameworks and tools that allow people to create something very precise and accurate, and then to build it out for the entirety of their organization inside and out. So it is the beacon that everyone benefits from. It's the beacon that customers benefit from. It's the beacon that internal audiences and stakeholders benefit from. So in their roles, they're seeing success levels because of greater customer insight that leads to more sales, greater customer insight, more sales, and the cycle continues.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that was going to be my next question for you. And maybe that's the answer is like, how do you know that you've landed on something that's working? And maybe the answer is more sales, but maybe you have a 12 or 18 month sales cycle. Like, what are some of the ways that you can say, we've hit it. We hit the right message and we're executing well?
Well, I mean, first of all, whenever I work with my clients, they start to see themselves in a better light. And it's more reflective of who they really believe they are in their souls and didn't have the words to articulate before. And oftentimes it's because they've learned something about themselves and maybe reinforced something that they hoped for about themselves through the eyes of their customers. So we know it's working when what we are putting out there is reflective of what current customers are already feeling, and new customers start to show some interest because it feels like something that they're also interested in. There are cases throughout the book that talk about the work that we did. Some of them happened much more recently. Some of them happened 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm able to share some of the anecdotes and things that my customers have experienced. Mm-hmm. That my clients have experienced since we did that work together in some of those chapters. And there's one client that I have that's a company based in China that sells a bulletproof and highly durable material. They're a competitor to Kevlar and a much newer entrant in the market. And their ambition was to get manufacturers to consider and try their product. And the challenge is in that particular industry that there's so much competition and so much of it is claims based, 30% stronger, X% more durable, this, that, and the other thing. And what we needed to emphasize that this new patented material was different than anything else out there. And that's the reason to try it, not because of some percentile claim that gets lost in the mix of all the other claims in the industry. We understood that they needed an uncompromising advantage in the manufacture of their products because this is an ingredient brand. And the brand idea for them is a material difference. And when this client of mine goes to trade shows and it says a material difference over their booth, it sparks conversation and interest and gets them into the conversation about how their material is materially different from everything else in the category. And it induces trial, and it gets manufacturers to consider retooling their factories and changing their products to include this material over what they've been using in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, incredible. And I think it's great to have there's so much pressure on marketers to have, a dollar for dollar ROI calculation on different investments. And that leaves brand investment difficult sometimes to justify. But I find it has the most impact on revenue in the end. It just is, there are some more qualitative measures in between, that sort of like, that internal feeling of like, I know what to say to people now, or I'm sparking conversation that I wasn't, or I'm getting people to, agree to a meeting that wouldn't before, versus, we spent $1 on an ad, we got $1 back in revenue. It's harder to justify sometimes, but there are ways.
there are ways, and what I share throughout the book as well is, an understanding of the science behind the approach that I'm recommending. Mm-hmm. And the idea that if you could help people understand scientifically without being a scientist, I'm not a behavioral scientist. I've adopted behavioral science understanding and brought it into a process. Anyone can do that. If with what I write in the book, you can share with your team how behavioral science rooted approaches are going to be more effective than what you've been doing in the past, then there's a pretty good argument there that people don't usually shy away from. It also can be said that you're not spending any more money to use an approach like this. You're just doing it in a more effective way. So again, this is not about spending more money. This is about actually making the money that you're spending be more effectively used.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100% agree with that. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, this was such a treat. Thank you so much for coming on, Kevin, and for sharing your insights on sparking brand desire through emotional intelligence. It's amazing.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been a great conversation. I'm really thrilled with your questions, and we got really into it. So that's wonderful.
Yeah, for sure. And for anybody listening, please make sure you're following Kevin on LinkedIn. Check out his book, Brand Desire, Spark Customer Interest Using Emotional Insights at branddesirebook.com. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Marketing Demystified wherever you get your podcasts, and join us next time for more conversations that help demystify the complex world of marketing.